I stood by the grill, flipping burgers with one hand while balancing a cold beer in the other. The sun hung low, casting a warm glow over our backyard, and the scent of sizzling meat filled the air. Laughter echoed from the patio where my wife, Emily, was pouring drinks for our friends. Her laughter, musical and unguarded, blended with the easygoing banter of the group, but lately, I'd begun to hear something else beneath it. An unfamiliar note that had me on edge. Our annual summer barbecue was a tradition, something Emily loved planning for weeks in advance. Usually, I'd catch glimpses of her peering over recipe books late at night or sending me texts about which craft beers to pick up. This year, though, she seemed distracted. She still smiled, but it never quite reached her eyes. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just tired from work. But then I saw her, leaning a bit too close to Tyler. Tyler had been my friend since college, a tall, broad-shouldered guy with an easy grin that seemed to charm everyone. He and his wife, Sarah, had moved to our neighborhood last year, and soon after, they'd become regulars at our get-togethers. It should have been comforting, seeing old friends settle nearby, but the way Tyler and Emily interacted made my skin prickle. I tried to brush it off, chalk it up to paranoia, but when Emily reached out and rested a hand on Tyler's arm, laughing a bit too hard at something he said, the bottle in my hand almost slipped. My stomach twisted. I shifted my gaze to the grill, poking at a half-burned hot dog to steady my nerves. "Hey, man, need a hand?" Tyler's voice cut through my thoughts, warm and casual. I looked up to find him standing beside me, a grin on his face. Emily lingered behind him, her lips curved into a small, unreadable smile. I forced a smile of my own. "Nah, I got it. Just about done here." Tyler chuckled, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "You always were the grill master." His touch felt heavier than it should have. I glanced past him, catching Emily's eyes. She quickly looked away, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. I watched as she moved back to the patio, her shoulders a bit too tense for someone hosting a party. As the night stretched on, I couldn't ignore the looks they exchanged. Quick, fleeting glances that anyone else might have missed but were painfully obvious to me. I found myself second-guessing every gesture, every laugh. Was it always like this? Had I just not seen it before? I took a long pull from my beer, the bitterness coating my tongue. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was being ridiculous. Emily loved me, she'd never given me a reason to doubt that. But the unease remained, gnawing at the edges of my mind. By the time the stars were out and most of our friends had trickled home, I was on edge. I gathered empty plates and bottles, trying to keep busy, but every time I looked up, I caught sight of them. Standing too close. Her hand lingering a second too long. Tyler's easy smile that didn't seem as harmless anymore. When Tyler finally said goodnight, clapping me on the shoulder with that same grin, I could barely muster a response. I watched him walk down the driveway, his silhouette fading into the night. Emily closed the door, letting out a breath that sounded too much like relief. I turned to her, the question burning at the back of my throat, but the words stuck. She looked at me then, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite name, guilt, maybe, or fear. For a moment, I thought she might say something. That she'd give me some explanation that would smooth over the tightness in my chest. But she just smiled, small and tired, and brushed past me. "I'm heading to bed," she mumbled, her voice soft. I stood in the empty hallway, the silence stretching. I should have followed her, should have taken her hand and asked if everything was okay. Instead, I stayed there, clutching an empty beer bottle with fingers gone numb. I didn't follow her to bed that night. Instead, I stayed downstairs, cleaning up the aftermath of the barbecue in silence. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second dragging out longer than the last. I tried to focus on the mundane tasks, collecting plates, wiping down countertops, taking out the trash, but my mind kept replaying the way Emily's fingers had lingered on Tyler's arm, the way she'd avoided my eyes. The darkness outside was thick and quiet, the kind that settled in deep, making everything seem heavier. By the time I finally trudged upstairs, the bedroom was dark. Emily was curled under the blankets, her back to my side of the bed. Her breathing was slow and even, but the tension in her shoulders gave her away. She wasn't asleep. I hesitated, one hand on the doorknob, the other hovering in the space between us. 1,000 questions crowded my mind, none of them coherent enough to voice. In the end, I slipped into bed wordlessly, leaving a few inches of space between us that felt like miles. The morning didn't bring any clarity. Emily was up before me, already dressed and halfway through her second cup of coffee when I dragged myself into the kitchen. She flashed me a small smile, but it was tight, brittle around the edges. "Morning," she murmured, staring down at the steam curling from her mug. "Morning." I pulled out a chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor. "You're up early." She shrugged, eyes fixed on the dark liquid. "Couldn't sleep." Her hands twisted around the mug, fingers pale from the pressure. I watched her for a moment, trying to catch her gaze, but she kept her eyes down, her posture tense. I wanted to ask her if she was okay, if she wanted to talk about whatever was making her avoid my eyes, but the words stuck, heavy and awkward. "How's Tyler?" I asked instead, the question slipping out before I could stop it. My voice was too casual, strained at the edges. Emily's head jerked up, eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she forced a smile. "Fine, I guess." "Why?" "Just wondering," I mumbled, tearing my gaze away and focusing on a crack in the kitchen table. "You two seemed close last night." Her fingers went still around the mug. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she let out a breath, something tight and nervous. "We're just friends," she said, the words coming out too quick, too practiced. "You know that." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the memory of those lingering touches, those stolen glances, it was like an itch under my skin, one that no amount of reassurance could soothe. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Just seemed like you two had a lot to talk about." Her eyes flashed guilt, annoyance, something in between. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." I raked a hand through my hair, frustration boiling up despite my efforts to keep it down. "Just making conversation." Emily's mouth thinned, but she didn't push it. She rose abruptly, dumping the rest of her coffee into the sink. The sharp clink of the mug against the ceramic made me flinch. "I have to run some errands," she said, already moving towards the door. "I'll see you later." She didn't kiss me goodbye. The door swung shut behind her with a soft click, leaving me alone in the too-quiet kitchen. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I busied myself with yard work and a long run that left my muscles aching and my lungs burning, anything to distract from the silence of the empty house. Emily's car was still gone when I got back. Hours stretched by. I reheated leftovers for lunch that I didn't taste and flipped through TV channels without really seeing them. My phone stayed stubbornly silent, no texts or missed calls lighting up the screen. I stared at it for what felt like hours, thumb hovering over Emily's contact, but I couldn't bring myself to call. By the time her headlights swept across the driveway, it was nearly midnight. I watched from the darkened living room as she stepped out, smoothing down her dress and glancing over her shoulder before heading inside. I barely had time to straighten up before the door swung open. Emily froze in the entryway, eyes flicking from me to the half-empty beer on the coffee table. Her shoulders stiffened. "Didn't think you'd still be up," she said, her voice carefully neutral. I shrugged, forcing a tight smile. "Couldn't sleep." She shifted, one hand still on the doorknob. Her hair was tousled, lips faintly smudged with what looked like leftover lipstick. My stomach twisted. "You were out late," I said, trying for casual and failing miserably. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I texted you. Told you I'd be late." I glanced at my phone, untouched on the coffee table. No new messages. Emily followed my gaze, her mouth pulling into a faint frown. "It must not have gone through," she muttered, looking away. "I was with Sarah." "Right," I said slowly. "Sarah." My voice must have given me away because Emily's eyes flicked back to me, wary. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing." I dragged a hand down my face, the fight bleeding out of me all at once. I was too tired for this, too tired for the lies I could see in her eyes but couldn't bear to hear spoken out loud. "Forget it," I mumbled. "I'm going to bed." I pushed past her, my shoulder brushing hers. For a moment, I thought she might stop me, might reach out and grab my arm or say something that would pull me back. But she stayed silent, her gaze fixed on the floor. I shut the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, closing my eyes. My hands were trembling, my pulse drumming hard and unsteady in my ears. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was being paranoid, letting my imagination twist things out of proportion. Or maybe the cracks that had been creeping through our marriage were finally splitting wide open, too deep to ignore anymore. The following week passed like a bad dream I couldn't wake from. Emily's late nights became routine errands, work, drinks with Sarah. Always an excuse, spoken with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I tried to believe her, to ignore the tightness in my chest every time she came home smelling faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. We barely spoke. Meals were eaten in silence, the air between us heavy with everything left unsaid. Her phone was always face down on the table, notifications buzzing softly like insects against glass. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching our marriage fracture in slow motion, powerless to stop it. By Thursday, I was running on fumes. Exhaustion turned everything hazy, even the accusatory voices in my head. I skipped lunch at work, pacing the empty office instead, raking my fingers through my hair until it stuck up in all directions. My co-workers gave me wide-eyed looks, but no one asked questions. The clock dragged to 5, and I barely made it home before the sky split open. Rain hammered down in thick sheets, drumming against the roof and the windows. Emily's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark when I stepped inside, damp and shivering. "Emily?" I called, voice echoing down the hall. No answer. A flash of lightning split the sky, lighting the living room in a harsh, white glare. I followed the sound of muffled music upstairs, my heart beating too fast, breaths coming short and shallow. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, pale light spilling out. I hesitated, fingers curling around the doorframe. It was stupid, the way my hand trembled, the way my stomach twisted with something raw and nauseating. I didn't want to go in, didn't want to see whatever was waiting on the other side. But I did. Of course, I did. Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me, shoulders hunched. Her phone was pressed to her ear, one hand knotted in the bedsheets. "I know," she whispered, her voice low and urgent. "I know, but he suspects something. I can tell. I just know, not yet. I'll tell him soon, I promise." My breath caught, a sharp pain digging between my ribs. "I can't tonight," she continued, her voice quivering. "He's been watching me." "No, I don't think so." "But if he finds out," her voice broke, a shudder running through her. "I know, Tyler. I know." The world narrowed, the edges blurring. I swayed, catching myself on the doorframe, wood biting into my palm. "Tyler." Emily turned, eyes wide and terrified when she saw me. Her phone slipped from her fingers, landing on the comforter with a soft thud. "Oh," she breathed, color draining from her face. I didn't hear you come in." I stared at her, my mind blank and roaring all at once. I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but watch her eyes fill with tears that glinted like shards of glass. "Were you," my voice cracked, came out rough and strangled. "Were you talking to him?" Emily flinched, her hands twisting in the sheets. "I can explain," she started, her voice shaking, but I was already backing away, the door swinging open under my grip. I stumbled down the stairs, her voice following, broken and pleading. "Please, just let me wait, stop, please." Her footsteps slapped against the hardwood, but I didn't stop. Couldn't. The rain was still coming down in torrents when I burst outside, cold and blinding. I didn't feel it. My hands were trembling, breath shuddering in my chest. I squeezed my eyes shut, fingers digging into my scalp hard enough to hurt. How long had it been going on? How long had I been blind to it? Months? A year? I squeezed the bridge of my nose, trying to steady my breathing, but the storm inside was worse than the one roaring above. The door swung open behind me, and Emily stumbled out, rain plastering her hair to her face. She wrapped her arms around herself, eyes wide and pleading. "Please," she choked, her voice barely audible over the downpour. "Please, just listen to me. I barked out a laugh that tasted bitter. Listen to what, Emily? My voice came out harsh, cracked at the edges. Listen to you lie to my face again? I heard you, I heard everything. Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with the rain. She took a step forward, then stopped, her hands shaking at her sides. I was going to tell you, she whispered, voice breaking. I just. How long? The question tore from me, raw and savage. How long have you been with him? She flinched like I'd struck her. It's not what you think, she tried, but her voice cracked under the weight of it. How long? I snapped, louder this time. Lightning flashed, illuminating her face in stark, broken lines. Her shoulders slumped. For a moment, she didn't answer, eyes flicking to the ground. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear, 8 months. The air left my lungs in a rush. I swayed, catching myself against the railing, white-hot pain stabbing through my chest. 8 months. All those nights she came home late, eyes bright and cheeks flushed. All those excuses, the lingering smiles, the way she turned away when I tried to hold her. 8 months of lies. 8 months of watching Tyler grin at me, slap my shoulder, drink my beer, all the while knowing he was. My vision blurred. I clenched the railing until the wood creaked, my knuckles bloodless and aching. I didn't mean for it to happen, Emily's voice came faint and shaky through the roar of blood in my ears. I love you. I never stopped loving you. Don't, I bit out, the word harsh and venomous. Don't say that. She flinched, tears streaking her cheeks. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. Please, we can fix this. I was going to end it, I swear. I let out a broken laugh, the sound hollow and cruel. You're a little late for that. Her face crumpled, eyes red and glistening. For a moment, she just stood there, the storm drenching us both, her hands trembling at her sides. Then she took a shaky step forward, fingers outstretched. I love you, she choked, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. I stepped back, the movement instinctive, the sting in her eyes a twisted sort of satisfaction. Don't, I rasped, voice rough and frayed. Don't touch me. Her hands fell limp, her shoulders hunching in defeat. The sight sent a fresh wave of fury crashing over me, bitter and scalding. I turned on my heel, storming back into the house, slamming the door shut behind me. The silence that followed was deafening. I don't remember how long I stood there, staring at the door with my hands still trembling and rainwater dripping onto the hardwood floor. My breath came in shallow, ragged pulls, each one carving deeper into the hollow ache in my chest. Outside, the storm raged on, rain battering the windows and thunder growling low and constant. Emily didn't knock. Didn't try to open the door. I wondered if she was still out there, soaking and sobbing on the porch, or if she'd finally gone to Tyler's. The thought twisted in my gut, dark and seething. I sank down on the bottom step of the staircase, hands dragging over my face. I could still hear her voice, cracked and pleading, I love you, I never stopped loving you. The words echoed, bitter and grating, like salt in a raw wound. 8 months. Almost a year of lies, of her slipping into bed beside me with his scent clinging to her clothes. My jaw clenched, muscles aching with the force of it. I'd trusted her, built my world around her. How was I supposed to reconcile that with the woman who had been sneaking around behind my back for nearly a year? Somehow, I managed to drag myself to my feet, muscles leaden and uncooperative. I needed air. I needed to move, to get out of the stifling silence before it crushed me. I stumbled down the hall to the kitchen, yanking open the back door and stepping into the storm without a second thought. Rain lashed down in icy sheets, plastering my clothes to my skin and numbing the raw ache in my chest. I leaned heavily against the porch railing, eyes squeezed shut, head bowed. The downpour washed over me, cold and relentless, but it wasn't enough to drown out the images searing through my mind. Emily's hand on Tyler's arm, her eyes bright and guilty, her mouth trembling around I was going to end it. But she hadn't. That was the truth of it, bitter and undeniable. She hadn't ended it because she hadn't wanted to. A harsh laugh tore from my throat, raw and empty. I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes, grinding down until I saw stars. This wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be standing alone in the rain, choking on the betrayal of the one person I thought would never hurt me. I stayed out there until I couldn't feel my fingers, until the chill had seeped bone deep and my limbs felt clumsy and numb. When I finally forced myself back inside, I left wet footprints across the kitchen tiles, my clothes dripping onto the floor. I didn't care. I grabbed a towel, dried my face with shaky hands. The kitchen was dark, shadows stretched long and cold. I moved on autopilot, feet dragging down the hallway and up the stairs to my bedroom. The door was still ajar, the light slanting out into the hallway. I pushed it open, slowly, almost expecting to find her sitting there with red-rimmed eyes and tear-streaked cheeks. But the room was empty, the bed unmade, her phone still abandoned on the sheets. I stared at it for a long moment, heart pounding unevenly. I knew what I was doing before I even reached for it, fingers shaking as I swiped the screen. Her passcode came easily, my birthday, of all things. The bitter irony made my chest burn. The messages were right there, impossible to miss. Texts from Tyler at all hours, smiling emojis, late night I miss US, photos I couldn't bring myself to open. I skimmed through them with numb detachment, the words blurring and searing all at once. I can't stop thinking about last night. He won't find out, babe. I promise. Can you sneak away tomorrow? The breath punched out of me in a harsh exhale, my fingers going limp. The phone slipped from my hands, landing face down on the bed. I pressed a hand to my chest, trying to ease the ragged pain clawing its way up my throat. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind, so utterly stupid? The signs had been there for months, the late nights, the sudden guardedness, the way she turned away when I touched her. I'd wanted so desperately to believe her that I'd ignored everything else. I sank down on the edge of the bed, one hand fisted in the blankets, the other pressed to my forehead. Anger flared hot and violent, chasing away the numbness. I wanted to smash something, to rip the room apart until there was nothing left but broken pieces. I wanted to make her feel even a fraction of the pain ripping through me. Instead, I let out a shuddering breath, fingers clenching hard enough to make my knuckles crack. My eyes burned, raw and stinging, but I blinked hard, swallowing it down. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the way my hands shook. Clothes were flung haphazardly over the armchair in the corner, her heels kicked off beside the dresser. I yanked open the closet door, the wooden hangers rattling against each other, and grabbed the nearest duffel bag. Her things went in first, dresses and sweaters stuffed in without care, heels and makeup bags and whatever else my hands closed around. I barely saw what I was grabbing, vision hazy and red-edged. Anger and betrayal twisted through me, sharp and bitter and unrelenting. I was done. Done pretending, done playing house with a woman who had already replaced me with my best friend. I zipped the bag with a vicious jerk, the sound harsh in the silence. My breath came fast and shallow, muscles aching from how hard I was gripping the straps. For a moment, I just stood there, staring down at the crumpled clothes and the faint smear of lipstick on the collar of one of her blouses. My hands shook, nails digging into my palms. Then the front door creaked open, soft and tentative. I went still, the breath catching in my throat. Footsteps patted down the hall, light and hesitant. "Please," Emily's voice came, small and unsteady. "Please, can we talk?" My hands clenched harder on the bag's straps, the sting in my palms grounding me. I took a slow breath, willing my voice not to crack. "There's nothing left to say," I bit out, low and cold. A soft gasp came from the doorway, followed by a sniffle. Don't do this. We can fix it, I swear." "No," I snapped, the word coming out sharp and final. I turned to face her, heart pounding painfully. Her eyes were wide and glistening, lips quivering around whatever excuse she was about to spill. I couldn't bear to look at her. Couldn't stand the way she was staring at me, like I was the one tearing us apart. I jerked my head towards the door, voice flat. "Take your stuff and go," I said, the words clipped and ice cold. "Or I will." Her mouth fell open, eyes brimming with tears. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen and stricken. Then her shoulders slumped, the fight bleeding out of her all at once. She took a step back, her hand falling limp at her side. Her eyes glimmered with something broken, but I forced myself to turn away, teeth grinding hard enough to ache. I waited until I heard the door shut behind her before I let the first tear fall. The silence that followed was suffocating. I stood in the middle of the bedroom, the duffel bag hanging limply from my hand, the echo of the door slamming still ringing in my ears. My breaths came fast and shallow, every inch of me wound tight and raw. It was over. Just like that, 11 years of marriage, of holidays and lazy Sundays, of shared smiles and whispered promises, ripped to shreds in a matter of days. I sank down on the edge of the bed, the duffel slipping from my fingers, and buried my face in my hands. The quiet pressed in, heavy and relentless, filling every crack and hollow left behind. I don't know how long I stayed like that, eyes shut, fists clenched, breath coming in short, ragged pulls. Long enough for the sky outside to darken completely, the rain easing to a soft drizzle that pattered against the windows. Long enough for the numbness to fade, leaving nothing but the aching, searing pain beneath. My phone buzzed on the bedside table, the screen lighting up with Tyler's name. The sight of it sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. I snatched it up, fingers trembling, and swiped to answer without thinking. "Man, come on," Tyler's voice crackled through the speaker, low and rushed. "Just let me explain, all right?" "It's not." "Don't," I bit out, my voice raw and frayed. "Don't say another word." He fell silent, the faint sound of his breathing carrying over the line. For a moment, I thought he'd hung up. Then he let out a heavy sigh, the kind that was probably meant to sound regretful but only made my blood boil hotter. "I didn't want it to happen like this," he muttered, each word slow and deliberate. "You gotta believe me, man, I never meant to hurt you." The laugh that tore from my throat was hollow, bitter. "You didn't want it to happen?" I echoed, voice rising. "You've been sleeping with my wife for 8 months, Tyler." 8. "And you want me to believe you didn't want this to happen?" He flinched, or at least I imagined he did. Silence stretched long and taut, each second winding the fury in my chest tighter. It just happened, okay," he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "We never meant for it to go this far. We were gonna tell you, we were just waiting for the right time." I bit down hard on my tongue, the taste of iron blooming sharp. Waiting for the right time. I squeezed my eyes shut, one hand fisting in the blankets to keep from throwing the phone across the room. "How long?" I ground out, teeth clenched so tight my jaw ached. "How long did you plan on making a fool out of me, huh?" Tyler sighed again, the sound grating. "Come on, man. Answer me," I snapped, my voice cracking at the edges. "I don't," he hesitated, then let out a breath. "I don't know. We were trying to figure it out. It's not like we wanted to hurt you, okay?" "Funny," I bit out, a dark laugh bubbling up. "You seem to manage just fine." Another silence, heavier this time. My pulse pounded hot and insistent in my ears, my hand gripping the phone so tight my knuckles ached. I wanted to scream, to drive to his house and put my fist through his smug face, to drag Emily back here and make her explain every lie, every secret smile, every whispered promise she'd broken. But the weight of it all pinned me in place, raw and helpless. "Look," Tyler tried again, his voice low and placating, let's meet up, okay? Talk this out. We're still. We're nothing," I spat, cutting him off. "We were never friends. Not if you could do this to me." That shut him up. For a moment, the only sound was the soft rustling on the other end of the line, like he'd pressed a hand over the speaker. Then a muffled curse, and the line went dead. I stared at the screen until it dimmed, my breath coming hard and fast. The room swayed, cold seeping into my bones. I let the phone slip from my fingers, clattering onto the hardwood with a dull thud. The days that followed blurred together, endless hours of pacing empty rooms, hands tugging at my hair, half-empty bottles collecting dust on the kitchen counter. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't do anything but replay every memory, every kiss, every whispered confession of love, dissecting them for the lies I hadn't seen. Emily texted twice, "Please, just talk to me. Let me explain." I deleted them without replying. Tyler tried to call again. I blocked his number. The house was too quiet. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh of the wind through the cracked window felt like a reminder of what I'd lost, of the life I'd built with Emily that was now little more than ashes. Her clothes still hung in the closet, her perfume lingered faintly on the sheets. I couldn't bring myself to touch any of it. On the third night, after I'd downed enough whiskey to burn the rawness in my throat to numbness, I finally snapped. I tore through the bedroom, yanking her dresses off hangers, shoving makeup and shoes and framed photos into trash bags with shaking hands. I didn't stop until the closet was bare, until every trace of her was gone. I dragged the bags to the front porch and left them there, slamming the door so hard it rattled in its frame. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. The divorce papers came a week later, crisp and clinical in a manila envelope that landed on the doormat with a dull thud. I stared at them for a long time, the words blurring and doubling. Irreconcilable differences. Cold and clean. No mention of betrayal, of nights spent in another man's bed, of the way my hands still shook whenever I caught sight of her handwriting. I signed them in a daze, the pen trembling in my grip. It was only when I dropped the envelope into the mailbox, the metal clang echoing hollowly, that it hit me, it's over. Really, truly over. No going back, no fixing it. The life I'd built, the woman I loved, gone. The weight of it sent me stumbling back against the mailbox, hands pressed to my face, breath hitching and shuddering. The tears came hot and silent, spilling over despite how hard I bit my lip, fists clenching until my nails dug into my palms. I don't know how long I stayed like that, slumped and trembling on the curb with rain trickling down my face. Long enough for the ache to dull, leaving nothing but a hollow, aching numbness. And in that emptiness, a single thought, raw and unrelenting, now what? But there was no answer. No hand to reach for, no voice to whisper that it would be okay. Just the silence, vast and endless and unbroken.